Hi, folks. Social structure is not a really easy concept to grasp, so here's a little help doing that. This is a mini lesson that introduces the concept of social structure and the building blocks of it, which are statuses and roles. And then there's a second PowerPoint that looks at groups and organizations. So recall that any social system has both a culture, a culture and a social structure. We've learned about culture in the previous module. Remember that culture means the values, beliefs, norms, language, also arts, different ways that we shape the material world, right? So social structure is the patterns or irregularities in interaction that emerge over time and that guide our behavior. So another way of thinking of social structure is that it's really the way that society is organized. Social structure can also be looked at as similar to a cell, right? A cell has a structure, it has different parts that are arranged in relation to the whole. And structure in the social world is the same way. Different parts are arranged in relation to each other to work together. Here's another drawing that shows the social structure of a particular social system. In this case, it's feudal society in Japan. And you can see, just like in the cell in the previous slide, there are different parts that are organized together into a whole, right, in Japanese society. In this case, the parts are people, but it's still an example of structure. Now, here's a graphic that shows an entire social system and how culture and social structure are related, right? So culture kind of infuses the entire social system. And then within it, there is social structure, which consists of social institutions, organizations, groups, and statuses and roles. And statuses and roles are the building blocks. So social structure shapes our behavior, and that's why it's important. So let me give you an example. What if I tell you right now to clap your hands? I'm assuming you probably did it. I don't know, maybe not because we're on Zoom. But what if I was a stranger on the street? Would you clap your hands if I walked up to you and told you to do that? Probably not. But in this context, you do it because I'm the teacher and you're the student. And we both know that the teacher is supposed to tell students what to do, and the student is supposed to do what the teacher tells them, right? We share an understanding of what teachers and students do because we live in a social system that has schools, and within the schools there are these particular positions or statuses called teachers and students, right? In sociological terms, those are statuses. So a status is a position within some social structure that links you to someone else. In a family, for instance, a child or a brother or a parent would be a status. At a restaurant, wait staff, cashier, or chef and customer, those are all statuses, right? Each status has a role linked to it, right? So the status is the position, and then the role is what you might think of as the social job description that's attached to it, or the expected behaviors, right? So in the status of student, your role includes reading the assigned materials, completing assignments, etc. And you do these things mostly without thinking about them because you know what you're supposed to do as a student. You know what your role is, right? So as a student, the path of least resistance is to do these things. That's another way of looking at this, that roles lay out paths of least resistance. What if I decided, for example, as a teacher, not to give any assignments or quizzes and just let students talk about whatever they want to talk about, and I didn't submit any grades for you? Well, I would encounter resistance from the department chair, or from the dean might call me into her office and say, "What the heck are you doing?" Right? I would encounter resistance because I'm not fulfilling my role as instructor in that case, or teacher, right? So here's another graphic that shows a football team, and the positions on the team are similar to statuses in a social system, right? Each player has a position, and attached to each position is a role. The quarterback, for instance, calls the play and passes the ball off to a player. Each of the other players in their positions have roles as well. Okay, statuses are of different types. They can be ascribed, achieved, or situational, and those are explained here. Ascribed is oftentimes statuses we're born with, though not necessarily, right? But they're typically ones that we haven't chosen or achieved in some way. So your gender, your race, being a sibling, all those are ascribed, right? Achieved statuses are different, and that these are ones that you earn somehow through action, or they might come to you through inaction too, perhaps, right? For example, a college dropout would be an example. You were in college, but then you didn't finish, so that would be an inaction. So things like athlete, parent, being an ex-felon because you've been in prison, those are all statuses that are achieved through something that you've done. The final one is situational. Many of the statuses that we hold as we go throughout our day are temporary, essentially, right? I'm a customer in a store, and as a customer, I don't steal things. I make sure I pay. I ask the service providers in the store for help if I need it. But then when I walk out of the store, I'm no longer a customer. So that's a situational status, right? So you can practice these by thinking for a minute about different statuses that you've occupied, say in the past week, and identify the role with each of them. Okay, so let's summarize a couple things about statuses. First of all, statuses exist independently of the individuals who occupy them. Statuses are part of the social structure. So you can and do step into statuses and step out of them. They're not attached to you, they're attached to the social structure. Right now, I hold the status of sociology professor, but when I retire, I won't have that anymore, but that status will still remain within USM, and someone else will step in to fill it, right? Um, as mentioned before, statuses by definition connect us to other people. They exist in relation to other statuses, right? Teacher, student, mother, child, etc. They create passive least resistance. In other words, they have roles attached to them that prescribe what we should do if we want to avoid resistance from others, right? And they influence, of course, how we act toward others and how others act toward us as well. Okay, so finally, there's one more concept that's important is role conflict. Because we occupy many different statuses as we go about our lives, sometimes the roles that we're expected to follow can actually come into conflict with each other. One example, a parent coaching a team that their child is on, right? On the one hand, they're a coach. So if their child does something wrong, maybe they'll be angry and yell at the child. On the other hand, they're also the parent of that child. So maybe they don't want to yell at the child for doing something wrong, but instead, comfort them and make them feel good, right? There's a Dodson and Luttrell article that's assigned for you to read that describes the role conflict faced by single low-income mothers, and they are trying both to be parents and also be employees at the same time and face a number of aspects of role conflict in that way. Another good example that students often encounter is being a student and also being an employee. So one important thing to note here is that role conflicts are a result of social structure. They're a result of the roles that are given to us through our statuses. And so because that's the cause of them, they can only be solved through social structural changes, right? So, for instance, a soccer league may decide, for instance, that parents cannot coach the team that their child is on, right? That would be a change in the social structure that would resolve that role conflict, right? Okay, that's it for this PowerPoint, and the next one is about groups and organizations.